Monty, tell me about the craziest small town show that you've ever done.
Oh God, the craziest small town show. I did a show one time outside of Sudbury. Well outside of Sudbury, where it was in a karate school, but with just I'm gonna say 8 people showed up, and it was like almost like a loft because they had a stove, and then there was a big hole in the roof. Where I would say I wasn't to code at all. Basically I just talked about the roof for a long period of time.
I remember one time me and Wani did a show together, and it was on a patio, and then someone just started playing Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy so loud that you couldn't really hear Monty's set, and Monty went, "Is that a municipal speaker?" And I laughed, and I was like, "That is so funny. You came up with that like off the top." And he was like, "Oh, that's a stock line." I was like, "You've done so many of these shows. You have a stock line if someone starts drowning you out on a patio?"
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I believe it was a municipal speaker. It was in the woods. It was like somebody had one hooked up to the tree or something.
Yeah, some guy just went, "Not today," and just plopped down a boombox. And we're like, "Is this 1985? What's happening?"
God, yeah, that didn't even stand out we did 2 shows there that night.
Yeah, and the audience stayed around, so we had to do another like different half hour for these like 4 like nice people, but
Yeah, they were
and then there was there were hecklers, but
Remember the crazy drunk guy came in and bought everyone drinks?
oh yeah, there was this drunk guy who just sat
that's
behind
nice.
Monty, being like Monty's hype man.
Yeah.
All the time.
And he was threatening to buy drinks. I'm like, yo, dude, buy drinks. And he's like, eventually his card cleared. And
And everyone was
drinks
surprised.
for everyone. Yeah, it seemed like, I was like, are you the mayor? I was like, I was calling him the mayor.
So you've done a lot of small town shows. Why continue to do them? I mean, if they're so insane and all these crazy things
Well,
happen.
for one, usually you get paid to go out there. And, and honestly, it's a good experience because it's, you want to talk about the idea that you want people to know you. They want to know you when you're on stage.
Sure.
And what better way than going to a place where you can't figure out why anybody would live there? You know, like, you're like, what do I possibly have in common with you? I can't, you have, ride a cowboy playing on municipal speakers in your town. And I'm supposed to relate to you and you're supposed to relate to me. There's nothing kind of more challenging than that in a way. But then at the same time, you kind of realize that everyone's the same. They just want to have a good time.
Right.
A lot of times they don't have a lot of like live performances there, so they're like very happy to have you. Sometimes not. Sometimes you go to a town and they're like, well, these guys suck. And I'm like, well, who do you think would come here? Anyone
They
good?
pay-
Right.
Think Eddie Murphy's coming?
I do wear the delirious suit now.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You wear it well. And it wears you, buddy.
Diana, you're from a small town.
Yeah.
So what's that like for you? Is it better going to a small town to do a gig or?
Well, I never did comedy. I didn't start comedy until I moved to Toronto. So
Oh, okay.
I didn't have the experience of starting in PEI. I don't really like doing stand-up in PEI. It's, well, I mean, I love going home. I love being from there and I love being home. But it's hard to tell jokes in the really small town from where you're from because you can't help but think that people just want you to fail when you go home because you're from a small place and a lot of people don't leave. So there's a little bit of a feeling like, you know, maybe I'm just being a dick, but maybe there's resentment because I left and they didn't. And I know I lived there for 21 years. People want to be able to leave the show and go, she's not that funny. Really, like it's just a weird feeling to go back home and just have this like weird sort of half support, half like I hope you bomb.
It's like a betrayal. They feel betrayed because like we invited you into our community.
Yeah.
And you're like, here's the bird. I'm going to Toronto.
Yeah, and then, but then if I ever, the people that do make it huge, like there was an Olympian from PEI, and people just, you know what I mean? Like they, if I ever made it huge, I'm sure they would be cool then, but right now they're just like either be amazing or be terrible. Be nothing in between. Like, otherwise.
Pretty
Or it could
good's
be a
the
town of
worst.
assholes. You never know. Like it's a small sample size.
Yeah.
Clifford, what makes small town shows so different from the big town shows?
I maybe am a little opposite. I really like the small town shows. And because I live in Hamilton and we're around a lot of different suburbs, I do a lot of them regularly. So I enjoy it because they're always more organic. I never stick to my script to say, you know, like I never really stick to my jokes. I'm just kind of going off that moment, and I've had a lot of good times. Like I was at Crystal Beach recently, and I stole a painting. That was awesome. But that doesn't happen at a club show. I always feel like whenever I'm doing a club, like
the paintings
I don't
are-
get to
They never let you
steal
leave.
the paintings.
You're not stealing comedy club paintings. You just go to small
The
towns and
paintings.
steal those.
Just-
Yeah, they're just
Steal
Seinfeld
headshots?
portraits everywhere. No, like I just find like you go up, they tell you don't go a minute over your time. It's very constricted where you're just like go do it. You get paid, sure. It feels more like work. Where this is, oh yeah, this reminds me of the joy of why I like comedy. Like sure, I'll get into crazy stories from these small town shows, and like yeah, I got tons of them. But like I like them. I always have a lot of fun.
Dylan, when you're doing a small town show, how do you adjust your act?
I just do more crowd work.
More crowd work.
Yeah, it's more fun
Yeah,
to play.
don't talk about TTC.
Right.
No, you can. You can. I discovered that you can do bus jokes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I remember telling a joke about a TTC and just being like, why the fuck did you start this joke? Because I was doing so well, and then I went into it because it was kind of like a second bit of a joke that had been going well, and I was like, no, they'll be fun. No, and they just looked at me like, you're an idiot. We don't.
Or they were
care."
like, well, I don't know what that is.
What?
Also, TTC.
Why are you saying these weird
What do
words?
those letters mean?
No, but yeah, I find it's more, you can play around more. Because you come into a small town, unless you're like, as they called him in my town, Jerry Steinfeld. That's what my dad will not be like, it's Steinfield. He's just up there saying the jokes. He doesn't dance. I was like, he should get into the dancing, that's for sure. So if Jerry Seinfeld's watching this, you gotta start dancing. But you play more because they want to. Unless you're someone big, they just want you to make fun of Earl. So you find out who Earl is.
Yeah.
Make fun
Yeah.
of Earl.
Or the neighboring town.
Yeah, exactly.
Monty, how about you? Do you adjust your act for the small town shows?
Definitely more, yeah, definitely more crowd work. And you know, like a lot of the small towns, you can tell them they can tend to they like to hear personal stuff. So if you're like, you could tell something the best joke in the world and be like, I don't know, that was alright, but like, look at this piece of shit shirt. They'd be like, yeah, like his shirt is lousy. I
Yeah.
always hated this guy's shirt.
Or just say how shitty their mall is, and they're go,
I love this.
Yeah.
I love this guy. He's personal. You know, and it's true though.
People there are more like, it's funny because a lot of people from the cities are like intimidated by small towns, but they're intimidated because they're just way more laid back.
Yeah.
Right.
They're
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
you can see it in how they sit. Like everyone in a comedy club is like this. Whereas like I've literally done shows for nothing but people like this. I'm like, you're my people. You're trying to figure out how to lay down in a chair. This is fantastic. If there was more chairs, you would all just be napping, and I could just lull you to sleep. This would be fantastic.
I feel like the small town people do have a bit more fun. Like I don't really. A lot of times I come in Toronto, I feel like it's very hipstery. Like they're just like waiting for me to talk about a bike. I'm like, I'm not gonna talk about a bike, guys. This is not gonna happen. You know, where you can go there and just like, yeah, you can literally fart for a minute and they're.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like there's good crowds. This is one of those things. It's just there's good crowds, okay crowds, and bad crowds. A bad crowd in a city is a bad crowd in a city. Bad crowd in a town is.
Yeah.
There's some people who are just like they're not in the mood to see a show, and then they get dragged there by somebody. So of course they're not going to be happy.
course, yeah.
Or
But then
there's a
there's some
show
people-
kind of imposed on them.
Exactly.
You know, like
Yeah,
they showed
those
up
are the
at the
worst.
regular
The
bar.
old mid-bite show. Oh,
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
what's this now? What's this guy talking about? They brought in a Mexican. Why? I don't understand. And then they're like, you know.
Everybody, I remember there's a show here where I heard one of my buddies told me a story where it was just an open mic. It wasn't paid, but there's in a restaurant, and then the guy comes on stage. Here's what the host does. He goes, "Everybody, shut the fuck up. Pay attention. There's gonna be stand-up comedy." And then he just introduced me. He didn't explain like.
I heard about that show from somebody else, I think.
I think I heard about that too.
Where it was like he just berated everybody and then it was immediately like, here we go.
In the mid-bite, Eastside Mario's or something like that, and someone's just like, "Stop eating that bread. This guy's gonna talk about his dick." And then you're like, "Why do I have to hear it? Because it's art, god damn it." And just like slapped it.
Dylan got everybody.
I think about weird stuff. Like, what if a cat was also a dog? Meow.